what I want to do. Yeah.
All right, welcome. My name is Chrissy Cordingley. Welcome to the Flare Up Show. Today's actually a really special episode because this is the first in a series of collaborative shows where the Flare Up Show, is being co-produced by Clarissa, Burt, and her company in the Limelight Media. You'll be able to listen and view this episode through both my regular Flare Up Show channels available on all podcast apps and YouTube, of course, but as well as in the Limelight Media with Clarissa Burt, which is also available on smart TV devices available everywhere. And introducing our fabulous guest who's committed to helping people live a better life and spend more time in their happy place. Dr. Gary Sprouse is the Less Stress Doc and author of the book Highway to Your Happiness, a Roadmap to Less Stress. So welcome to the show, Dr.
Well,
Sprouse.
thank you for having me on. I am so honored to be here.
We're so excited. I'm just so excited because I just knew, even just reading your bio and reading your book, I'm like, we're going to have a lot of smiles. This is going to feel
Oh,
great. This
yeah.
is going to be my therapy for the day. I'm so excited. So thank you for
Well,
being here.
here's what I've learned about myself. I am not an average physician. Like I used to think I was average, and I was like, yeah, no, you are not, right? So like for Halloween, I would get dressed up in costume and come to the office. And some of the people were like, you can't do that. People are going to freak out. I'm like, no, actually, my patients sign up to be in there for Halloween to see what I'm dressed up as. I'm like, yeah.
Yes, yes,
I've
of
also
course.
been known to sing to my patients, which is a little bit weird too, right? So yeah.
No, no, that's great.
Yeah.
Yes,
So my wife,
depending on the
my wife
patient.
and I do karaoke, and people go, "Well, who's the better singer?" I go, "Oh, my wife's a way better singer, but I'm the way better entertainer." So it's like,
Yeah. Do you duet? Do you sing like some
yes. Wait,
together or
no, we
Love
go.
Shack? The 52s. What do you do?
What did you just say?
The Love Shack, like the
Yes,
B-52s.
that's how did you know? Are you kidding? Did you catch our show somewhere? What?
No, me and my best friend, we used to do karaoke when we were a bit
We have
younger.
been doing Love Shack literally around the world.
I want to see a video of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So we were in Iceland and we went and did the karaoke, and we end up in this basement of this bar with like 30 people who are tatted and had like piercings. And we get there and we're like, okay, yeah, here's these 60-year-old white people in this group. We're like, yeah, we fit right in, right? Yeah.
Party.
But
Yeah.
after we sang, the audience was great. They were like, you guys are amazing. Like, are you guys rock? Like, are you professionals? They're like, yeah. Like, yeah. So whenever I retire, we're gonna go back to Iceland and become rock stars.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Yes, yes. You definitely live what you preach, right? So,
Yes.
how do you define a happy place? So, your happy place might be different. Like, someone might be sitting there, an introvert, going, if karaoke is the happy place, I'm not going. But, but happy place isn't just one thing, right? It can mean
No,
different.
absolutely. Well, this is okay. Well, here's one of the reasons this happened. I'd write in this book, and it was my first title was Too Much Stress. It's like like toolbox for less stress, or too much stress is bad, or something like that. And then I realized, wait, so I'd ask my patients, like, if you had less stress, where would you be? And they gave me this look like, I don't know. I never got that far. All I ever thought about was having less stress. And I'm like, well, that's not good. You're on the side of the river where the stressed outside, and on the other side is something else, but you don't even know what it is. You just think it's different than where you're at. So then I was
Yes.
like, wait, we have to define what a happy place is where there's a lot less stress. And so then it started me on this exploration of figuring out what is a happy place, right? And you're exactly right. Everybody has their own little variation. But what I did discover was there's components to everybody's happy place, the same, and they're underlined to everybody's happy place. And so I came up with, I think there's like six. So the first one is that there's contentment, which is sort of like a baseline. Like
Mhm.
there's certain, like you feel a peace, and yet contentment can be low or it can be high. It just depends on the person and what's going on in their life, but it tends to be pretty consistent, right?
Yes.
But then there's times where you have pleasure and something happens that's really awesome. Like, you're married and you get married, right? Or you have a baby, or you graduate, or you get some honor. And it's like the line goes way up, but that pleasure is short-lived. It's by definition not permanent. And so eventually it comes back down to that same baseline. Then the third, and this is actually, it was an ad that I had to add in there, was there's the anticipation of pleasure. And you're like,
Mhm.
wait, what? So that's like, so you can go, I'm going to be going on a trip. So I'm going to Canada twice actually next year. I'm going to Banff and then I'm going to Nova Scotia. Well, I can think about how beautiful it's going to be and how cool it's going to be for months. Like, and that gives me pleasure right this second, thinking, oh man, when I go to Banff, when I go to Nova Scotia, it's going to be awesome. And in my mind, there's no bad things that are going to happen. My luggage is going to show up, the car's going to work, right? There's not going to be long lines. So the anticipation of pleasure can go on for months. The actual vacation is going to take a week, maybe two, right? So anticipation becomes this incredibly big thing. Then there's gratitude. And gratitude is, I'm not taking anything for granted. I'm being thankful for everything. And here's my wife's line. We used to own a recovery residence. And she would say to the clients, they were like, yeah, what do we have to be grateful for? And she goes, do you have indoor toilets? And they were like, well, yeah. And you're like, well, have you ever lived your life without one? They're like, oh my God. Yeah, no, that'd be horrible. Like, yeah, like all these things that we take for granted that we don't think about. And you're like, no, when I turn the tap water on, the water comes out. What? Yeah. So one of the things, I had this thing where I tell people, like, you wake up in the morning and you get 50 points, 10 points because you're alive, 10 points because you're safe, 10 points because you got food and water, 10 points because your spouse is safe, right? And it's like, and you have a purpose in life. 50 points just by open your eyes, and now you got 50 points. Yeah, how better way to start the day, right?
Yes.
So when you start feeling grateful, everything is awesome. Then the next one is called, it's called fulfillment. And so lots of people have lots of money. Externally, they're successful. They have, they have a media presence. They got 1,000 followers, and they're miserable. And you're like, what the heck? What's going on here? So there's three parts to fulfillment. One is being curious. So as an organism, curiosity is critical to us, and it's been made pleasurable. So when we're kids, we're crazy curious. As we get older, we're a little less curious, but we're still curious. And the more you learn, the more it feeds that curiosity, which gives you that pleasure of learning something new.
Yes.
And second is giving, because again, as an organism, we're designed to live in a group. And in that group, you want the whole group to survive. And so giving has been made pleasurable. So when you give to people, it makes you feel better and it makes you feel fulfilled. So I'm going on a Dominican Republic. We're going to build a kitchen for the school. And apparently this group has gone down a couple other times and built like a classroom, built a second story. So this year they're going down and I'm going to join them with my wife and we're going to be building a kitchen. So we're going to be slogging bricks and mortar and all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but you know what? These people's lives are going to be better because we're giving to them, right?
Yes.
And then the last piece is having of fulfillment is having a purpose. And I don't know if you've read the book. It's a guy, Viktor Frankl, and he wrote a book and he survived the Holocaust. And what he did was he had a purpose. He had to get out and write a book to help people.
Yes.
And that purpose got him through that miserable situation. And to me, the big takeaway from that was not only did the purpose help him survive, but what he writes in the book is people would come up to him afterwards and say, well, what magic did you have? What an incredible person you were that you could do this. And he went out of his way to say, you know what? There wasn't anything special about me at all. Like, I'm just a normal human being. Like, you can do this too. And that was the powerful message of that book, is it's not just, you don't have to be a Superman or a superhero, that you have the ability to have a purpose in life. And that purpose will give you direction where you want to go.
Yes. I love that. There's a couple of things you said that made me think of thoughts, which is why I was writing. I wanted to stay present and not forget the thoughts. I was actually just speaking to a friend yesterday. They were talking about not feeling appreciated at work, and they're really quite unhappy. And the reasons they're unhappy are 100% valid. But when they say I'm not appreciated, I ask, so how could they show you appreciation? What would you need to feel appreciation? And she was like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, what behavior would someone do that would feel like appreciation for you? Because if you can't define the other side of the river, which is where I got that thought from, like where you said, like, it's not just a concept, there's an actual, you have to have a vision for what that might look like. And then sometimes you have to communicate it, because just like the happy place is different, appreciation is different. So they may think appreciation is by just not bothering you, right? And just letting you do your thing, where you're feeling ignored and you want to be recognized. So letting people know how to show appreciation is really important. When you
Absolutely.
go to say, I need more appreciation, you need to give people some, you need to know for yourself what that is, right? And that's part of defining your happy place too, right? Is knowing what that would look like for you.
Too many bosses think appreciation is giving you money.
Yeah.
And it turns out money is not the answer. Most people, I mean, they will like money and they want to have extra money, but that's not how they see people as giving them appreciation. There's way
No.
other ways that don't even cost any money. They just go,
Yes.
hey, you know what? You did a good job. Attaboy, right? Like for most people, that's way more important than getting a raise.
Yes. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. The the other part was when you talked about the anticipation, when it was interesting. I had gone through some trauma, and then I had realized when I woke up and I thought it was anxiety, like because that stomach, that feeling of like,
Mhm.
but there was something happening the next day that I was actually really looking forward to. And it took a minute, but I was like, oh, you're actually excited.
Ooh.
Stomach. Oh my God. This is such a good feeling. So when he said that, like creating moments to be anticipatory, and we can do that even in small things, depending on people's circumstances, we may not be able to go on a trip, but maybe we can look forward to getting an ice cream or going for a nice
Oh,
walk or
yeah,
enjoying a
no,
movie or
absolutely.
something that we like just get pleasure from, right?
No. Waking up in the morning, how pleasurable is that? Yeah, right? Yeah, no, I mean, like going to a restaurant, or going to see your mom or going to see your kids or whatever. Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. There's like a crazy amount of pleasurable things we do as long as we pay attention and recognize them as pleasurable things to do.
Be present with them. Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
So yes, yes, yes. So what keeps, if it's like it is quite simple, maybe it's not always easy, but it really is quite simple. But what, knowing that there are things that we can be happy about, what keeps us from getting to the happy place?
Yeah, well, so that's where I started. Like, what's keeping us from our happy place, right? So this was my big insight. So we have all these stresses that are keeping us from that happy place. And we talk about worry and guilt and regret and feeling overwhelmed and our self-esteem is taking a hit. And I'm like, okay, well, those are all big stresses. Like, how do you fix that? Well, the first thing you have to do is figure out where they're coming from. Like, where did worry come from? What is worry, right? That's one of my other questions I ask patients. If I asked you to define worry, how would you define it? And so they get this look on their face, like, I got this, right? I can use it in a sentence. And when I say worry, I know what that feels like. And the people I'm talking to know what they're feeling like. I'm like, okay, well, tell me what it is. And they're like, well, it's, I don't know, it's something, it makes you feel bad. And you're like, well, okay, that's good. And it's
Yeah.
like, and it's something you do over and over and over again. I'm like, okay, so if that's your definition, how would you fix that? And they're like, oh, I don't know. And what I found is that people don't have very good definitions of what these problems are. So then fixing them becomes even more difficult. So my big insight that actually led to writing this book was when I looked at these stresses, I was like, wait, let's look at the skills that humans have. So I'm a physician, and so I'm used to writing prescriptions for people and saying, hey, here's a medicine, it has this great benefit. It can have some side effects. So we're going to try to maximize the benefits and get rid of the side effects. Well, then I looked at our mind and I go, wait, so we have this skill that we can envision the future. Amazing, right? We can go, hey, tomorrow I'm going to do this, and next week I'm going to do that, and 10 years from now, this is going to happen. But the side effect is then you have to think about it and worry what's going to happen, what bad things could happen. And I'm like, and we have the luxury. I go, hey, you know what? I want chocolate. No, I want vanilla. Or I want to go here. No, I want to go there. We have the luxury of choice. But the side effect is that then you have to regret your choices. So what it came down to was the majority of human stresses are actually side effects to our skills. So I paint this picture for people. I'm sitting in my living room watching TV and the news comes on. And my dog, who's 14 years old, white, very cute, but lays there, right? So we're both watching the TV and the war comes on and there's bombs gone off and a tornado shows up and there's political discord and there's all these, immigration problems and vaccine. And I'm going, right? And my dog's just laying there. Like, don't you see what's going on? Like, you're right there. Can't you see this? And she's just laying there. I'm like, what? So, but this is what I realized, because she doesn't have the skill of choice. She doesn't have the skill of envisioning the future. So she's just hanging out in her happy place, right? Because she doesn't have those skills. So the question that in the book, the reason I wrote the book was then, how do we keep the skill? Because a lot of psychologists will say, well, just live for today. That's a traditional advice. Live for today. And you're like, but I don't want to live for today, right? I don't want to give up my skill of envisioning the future. And I certainly don't want to give up all the memories I have of really good things that have happened in the past. I say this, I want to live in all three tenses happily, right? So the question then is, how do I keep my skills and get rid of the side effects? And that's where the book comes in.
You made me giggle when you talked about your dog, because so I'm neurodivergent. I have ADHD, and that comes with anxiety, which we talked about pre-show in the green room. But my spouse is neurotypical. And so it's really interesting because he's just like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'll do that. I'm like, what? You don't have like this dialogue going off in your brain about how much energy that's going to take? He's like, no, just do it. I'm like, you don't worry about your decisions? He's like, what's the point?
Wow. So okay.
This is mind blowing. Yes.
Yeah. Well, one of the tools that I came up with was, so let me give you my definition of worry, because that to me, the definition is what's critical. So the definition is, worry is using this incredible skill of envisioning the future, but then focusing on all the bad things that can happen, and then having the fear reaction as if they happened right now.
Yes.
So the problem with worry, when you're having that fear reaction, is there's nothing to make it stop. Like if you go, excuse me, I might get on a plane and it'll crash. Well, because you're thinking it's not real. It's just out there. It's just a thought. Well, there's nothing to make that thought stop. So it can just keep going on and on and on and on forever. And there's no end to it. And that's where people get into trouble with worry. So the tool that I came up with is what I call realistic optimism. So realistic optimism is like, hey, I have a choice. Like, I can choose to look at the bad things and focus on them, or I can choose to look at the good things that might happen and focus on that. Because if I focus on something good happening, guess what? That makes me feel good right now. And there's nothing to make it stop. Like, so it's really nice, right? So the problem is that all organisms were set up to keep their environment safe. And that includes humans. So we're always checking our environment to make sure it's safe, right? But the problem that humans have gotten into is our environment isn't just what we can sense now. Like my dog, she only can sense, like if she hears or sees, like if somebody walks across our yard, she's like, right? But as soon as the person walks away, then she goes back to relaxing and hanging out, right? I'm going, what if the dog came back? What if I was outside? What if my little granddaughter was out there? Right. So I can keep on going forever. So it's not just our environment where we can sense. Now our environment, because of videos and TVs, now our environment is the whole earth. Because now I can go, do you see what's going on in Ukraine? What's happening down in Israel? What China, Russia, right? Like, so my whole world now I have to keep safe. Then it's not just the world, it's the whole universe, because we watch movies where asteroids are trying to destroy the earth and viruses are trying to destroy the earth and the sun's going to explode. Yes. But then it's the future. So now the future is literally part of our environment. And if your job is to keep your environment safe and the future is a part of your environment, what are you going to do? Look for all the bad things that could happen in the future and try not let, right? So it's natural for us to look for the bad things. The key is not to focus on them. And so I say to patients, do me a favor, write down 10 bad things that can happen. And they go, drrrr. I go, okay, now write down 10 good things that can happen. And they're like, nah, that would never happen. Yeah. Because they're so used to going down the bad pathway that they've forgotten there is another side to it. And so that's where the optimism part comes in. But you have to be careful. And this is why it's called realistic optimism, is you can't deny that bad things could happen, but you don't have to have fear. You can plan without having fear. So then that's the second tool that I have, is called a worry organizer. So here's the worry organizer. So a patient comes to me and says, Doc, I'm worried that I know I'm going to have breast cancer. And I'm like, what? What do you mean? What? Like, she's like 40 years old. And I'm like, what do you mean you're going to have breast cancer? She goes, like, why are you worried about that? She goes, well, because my mom and my sister both have breast cancer. And I'm like, well, so the first category is, what are you worried about? So she's worried about breast cancer. Second, why? Well, my mom and my sister had breast cancer. Third category is, well, how likely is it to happen, and how bad would it be if it happened? So that's where she goes, I said, well, what do you think? And she goes, oh, 100% chance I'm going to get breast cancer and 100% chance I'm going to die. And I'm like, well, you just gave your a death sentence. Like, what? Like, why wouldn't you freak out? I go, well, here's the right numbers. 15% chance you'll get breast cancer. If you have a family history, 15% chance. And because we're going to catch it early, there's an 85% chance that you're going to survive. And she looked at me like, wait, what? Now, she believed me. And when she did, this weight came off her shoulder because I gave her life back, right? Just by giving her different statistics. And then the fourth category is like, well, how, what can I do to make it not happen? So like mammograms and BRCA genes, blah, 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 right? And then the last category, which is the one that people freak out about, is, well, what if it happens? And you go, okay, well, what if it happens? What if you get breast cancer? What are you going to do? Oh, well, I'm going to make sure my will's filled out, and my husband and my sister and my other sister are going to make sure they take care of my kids, and blah, 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 and I'm going to tell you what I want. So now it's planned out. So now I don't have to fear about it because it's already planned out. So when you put that all down on a piece of paper, yeah, then you don't have to go wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning going, oh, what was I supposed to worry about? I forgot, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
Found those two tools put together really help a lot with worry.
Yes, it's sort of like limiting beliefs come sometimes from limiting experiences, but we can have disconfirming experiences, and we can do that all the time, right? So for instance, there is a friend of mine who was going through something at work, which involved sort of a toxic coworker. It was really nerve-wracking at the time. He was worried. They were worried about legal repercussions. They were worried about stature, losing their job. Like, there was all these things that felt very real to them at the time. And there was definitely uncomfortable meetings, but it never resulted in any of those things. Actually, everything sort of just blew over, and everything went fine, as it should have, because they didn't do anything wrong. And so recently, so a few years later, this was just recently, they're like, something similar is happening again. What if? I'm like, well, statistically, if we look at what happened last time, you're worried about the same things, but that's actually not likely that that's going to happen, because you thought the exact same thing then, and it didn't. Right.
That's why I think what I found was, by writing all that stuff down in an organized fashion, then you don't have to drive yourself crazy. And here's the cool thing. So half your brain has to like remember the stuff, but when it's written down, now you can use all of your brain to try and solve the problem. And the second is, you can now take it to the doctor, to the expert, or to your friend, or to whoever, and they don't have to read what's in your mind because it's all written down on a piece of paper. And then they can give you some feedback and go, oh, no, that's not right. That statistic is wrong. No, you can change this, blah, blah, blah. So I found like here's my fun examples. Like, some kid comes, actually, this happened last night. I'd say, my friend goes, my son came to me and said, I want to go see a rock concert, the Rolling Stones. And you're like, he's like, yeah, that's awesome, right? But then he goes, oh, yeah, but it's in Germany. And you're like, wait, what? So the statistic of like, well, how likely is something bad to happen? And then how bad would it be? Just changed dramatically when it went from I'm going to a concert to I'm going to a concert in Germany. And so the statistics all change, which then changes your decision, right? But if you're just arguing with your son, you're like, no, you can't go. And you're like, and then your son goes, well, you're just a jerk. And well, you're just a snotty-nosed kid, or blah, blah. Like, no, let's talk statistics. How likely is it that this is going to go bad? How bad would it be if it goes bad, right? And you start putting numbers on it. Well, then you're talking about numbers, and you're not making each other feel bad because you don't like their opinion, right?
Yes. You're just putting a little bit of sense around it, and you're looking at practicality a little bit. Just what are the tools? What are the
Yeah,
support
you're making
structures?
objective is what I say, right? So
Yes. Yes. When it came to your book, I when I read the first chapter about Cindy, I actually felt a bit emotional reading it because her story of overwhelm, and then the shame and the guilt she was placing on herself for feeling overwhelmed, and when we're overwhelmed, we tend to make mistakes, and then really compounding that message she was delivering to herself about not being capable, and then how it was discovered through that process that she also was neurodivergent. Um, I, to be honest, as someone with ADHD myself, I sometimes get wary when I pick up books on stress because it often piles a lot more on the person themselves solo to just fix themselves.
mhm. Yeah.
And neurodivergence, but it could be anybody with trauma. We sort of mentioned this in the green room as well, that we tend to take over responsibility
Mm.
for failures in systems. And we sort of carry entire loads of stress, not just for ourselves, but for the people around us. But your book actually is super refreshing, and even in this discussion that we're having, because you exemplify the power of support structures and validating people's lived experiences. It's not just a brushing away of the stress or human experience with bubble baths, spa dates, or growing a thicker skin. This book actually makes people feel seen, and teaches them tools to approach their environment and adjust their environments for success, as well as bolster that inner confidence and that trust in that inner voice. So I just wanted to say that I really appreciated this about your
You're gonna
book.
make me
And thanks for
cry.
sharing. Aw.
I mean, that's exactly what I wanted to accomplish with that book. So if that's working, yay. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I wanted to get out of this. Like that's yeah. I mean, there's too many people out there. Like, there's thousands of books on how to have less stress, but most of them just going, okay, well, do
For sure.
mindfulness or go to a bubble bath and go to a spa day or whatever. And you're like, yeah, well, that's nice. But if you don't know what it is you're trying to fix, then it's just going to keep coming back. And it's like, here's what I realize is like, when someone has a stressful thing happen, so like, they make this list of here's the top 10 stresses. So like your spouse dying is a big stress, right? But what I realized was that there's components to what make it so stressful. So that the components are like I can't fix that your spouse died. Like that just happened. That's just there, right? But what the components are that then you're worried about what's going to happen and you feel regret because you didn't do this and you feel guilty that this happened. Then you get your self-esteem takes a blow and you're feeling overwhelmed. Those are things I can do something about. Like I can help you with those things. And here's some very practical things that will help reduce those things. It won't bring your spouse back, but it will certainly change all those other things, which will make it. And this is what I say to people. Like when your spouse dies, there's a giant hole in your life. If I can make this is dysfunctional, but if I can make it here, well, now you can function. I don't need to make it, I don't need to make it disappear. I'm not trying to make it disappear. But if I can go from here to here, you can get function back in your life.
Yeah. So you can handle it. And then
Yes,
you believe you
exactly.
can handle it. And then that becomes better because less things become worrisome because you're like, look what I can handle. I
Yeah.
know I can handle it.
In
It's
my, I'm in the process of writing another book further along the road, right? So, in fact, I was just writing down the ideas. I got probably like 3 books in my head, right? Anyway, but one of them is on grieving. And
yes.
so, I had a patient come to me and his daughter had gotten killed in a car accident, which was horrible, right? And he said, every time I go out to barbecue, I start crying. I'm like, what? He goes, well, that was something that my daughter and I did a lot. And like, we enjoyed it and we had a great time. And now when I go out there, I just miss her and like I start crying. And I said, you know what? Your daughter's there's still a whole bunch of your daughter around. Like she might not be here physically, but in your memory bank, there's a whole lot of your daughter. Like you could have conversations with her. I said, here's the opposite. When you're missing your daughter, go to the barbecue pit, and that's where she'll be. And next time I saw him, he had a big smile on his face. He goes, yeah, you were right, Doc. He goes, when I miss her now, I go out and barbecue, and there she is. I'm like, yeah, because
Yeah.
we when we're grieving, we tend to focus on what we've lost and forget how much we still have. And it's like, yeah. So when he did that, it was great. And the second thing is when we have funerals, and I think here's the reason we have funerals. 2 reasons. One is because even though you've lost a connection, you realize there's 99 other connections that are still in the room. And
Mhm.
second is like you cement the memories that you have as a group. So it's like I went to my grandmother's funeral and people were talking about her raspberry bushes and her Afghans that she would make. And you're like, oh yeah, I forgot about that, right? And you're like, so now it's like, yeah, it's stuck in my brain. So as long as those memories are in my brain, my grandmother's still around, right? And so it's
Yeah.
like when you focus on what you still have, then your grieving goes down.
Yes. I'm a big believer that the opposite of fear, anxiety, or grief isn't courage or bravery. It is curiosity, which is what you've talked about as well. And that's exactly what that is to feel those
Interesting.
things and then to get curious about what it is that we might need or need to move forward. That's what your book does, is it teaches you to use some of those painful feelings as a compass, as to like, oh, this is just information. How curious can I be about this? What do I
Yep.
need to
There you
do
go.
or
Yes.
feel or go through? Because it's not the feeling it that's the problem, right? It's how we tend to move forward or what supports we have in place. And those are all
Well,
things that can
right.
make
But
things
when you start
manageable.
looking at where our stresses are coming from as side effects to our skills, then you're like, oh, now I understand where worry comes from. And so now I can do something about it. When we,
Yeah.
as a doctor, we used to take care of diabetes, 300 years ago, and all we knew was that it was too much sugar. Well,
Yes.
okay, what do I say to someone who says you have too much sugar? Okay, well, eat less sugar, right? That's the only thing you can say. But now
Yeah.
it's 300 years later, and I go, oh, yeah, it's your pancreas and your liver and your stomach hormones and your glucose transport mechanisms and your insulin levels. Well, now I have like 50 tools that I can use. So our treatment of diabetes, since I've been a doctor for 38 years, since I've been a doctor, have changed dramatically, and our results are so much better because now we know what the problem is, so we can make better tools that work better and more efficient. And I feel like we're in our psychological world, we're living where we go, yeah, diabetes is too much sugar. So when I start defining what regret is, what guilt is, what worry is, then I go, oh, well, here's some tools that make a whole lot of sense and they'll work better. Somebody asked me the other day, like, what technological advances are there will help deal with your stresses? And I go, and I'm like, it stumped me for a second. I'm like, there's all kinds of things that people can do to have less stress. But if they don't know what it is they're treating, they won't work or they won't work very well. So when you understand what you're treating, then all these techniques work. A day spa works. An app on your phone that helps you will work. Anything works as long as you know what it is that you're trying to do.
Yes. 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 It's like rather than, I say this a lot, that's one of my favorite sayings, rather than sitting on a tack and taking an Advil for the pain, you pull the tack out. Yeah.
I like that. That's a good line. Yeah, good line. Yeah. Yes, there you go.
I love catchy sayings. Yes.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Gary, what is someone after picking up your book or even just listening to this, what's one of the first things that they can do to to feel less overwhelmed and feel less stress and start their journey to the road to happy?
Okay. Well, let's start with overwhelmed because as a doctor, I get to see a lot of people who come in the office that are overwhelmed. They got medical problems, psychological problems, there's things in their environment, there's a pandemic, that kind of stuff. So they come in overwhelmed. And it's a scary place for most people because they haven't been there. And the way I describe being overwhelmed is you've gotten past your coping skills. Like you have, it's like say you have 8 coping skills and now you're at 10 and you're like, oh, I'm way beyond where, like, I don't even know what to do now because I'm beyond. And like in the book, what I talk about is like if you went to the hospital and you got $1,000 bill, but you only have $800 in your checking account, you're freaking out. But then somebody comes along and says, hey, you owe me $5 for the magazine, and you're like, you freak out just as big because even though it's only $5, it's $5 that you're $200 short already, and that just makes you $5 more short. So you're like your coping skills have gone beyond, and you have no way. There's nothing left, right? And so when you find yourself in that place, and I liken it to you're in a dark cave where there's literally no light, and you're sitting there and it's wet and it's mucky and it's dank, and you go, this is a horrible place. I have to get out of here. And you stand up and you hit your head on this roof on the roof, and then you reach out and you touch something slimy and you lean back and there's something sharp, and you're like, you see no way out. So you're just resigning yourself to sitting there in this cold, dark place, miserable, because like I just have to live like this. And you're like, oh, right. So when I hear that, I go, oh, my heart beats, because I'm like, no, it doesn't have to be like that. Let me come with me. See this little light over here? That's the way out, right? So I want to give people a way out. You don't have to live your life like that, right? So the way out is two things. And one is called S curves. And so S curves are like, think of an S, okay? And one or two problems you're okay with. And you're like, you're under the line where you're in control. But then a third problem comes and it goes right from under control, right on up to being overwhelmed. And then overwhelmed becomes a fourth problem. So now you got four problems. And what I show people is with that S curve is like, you know what? All we have to do is get rid of one problem. And it doesn't even matter which one it is. And you'll be back down to feeling in control. So it's not as bad as you think, number one. Number two is I use this thing called shoe boxes. And you'll like this one, right? I got this from my friend Melissa. So shoe boxes are, if I walk into a room and there's 100 shoe boxes, but the bottom's here, the top's here, the left shoe's there, the right shoe's there, the piece of crinkly paper is all, and you got 100 of these things thrown all over the room, and you walk in and you open the door, right? But if you walk in the room and there's 100 shoe boxes and the bottom's there and the lid's on top and the shoes are in and the paper's crinkly and they're all up on the wall and they're nice and neat, same amount of shoe boxes, same amount, right? But it's not overwhelming.
Yeah.
Because they're all organized, right? So now you just take one shoebox down, you look at it, you put it back up, take another shoebox down, you look at it. So in the world, I say, what people are doing when their shoeboxes are all over the place is called lumping. And so when people lump, what they do is I got this thing, and then this thing, and then this other thing, and then oh yeah, I forgot about that, and they throw it on top. And you end up with this mound of problems that's so big, they don't even know where to start. They're like, oh, forget it. I'm just in this dark cave. I don't even know. It's dark, it's black. I don't know where to start, right? When you compartmentalize, that's when the shoe boxes are organizing up on the wall. Like now, each problem is an individual problem. And the more compartmentalized you can keep the problems, the less overwhelming they become, because no one of those problems is overwhelming. It's only when you lump them all together that you end up in that horrible, overwhelmed place. So what I tell people is think in shoe boxes so that you don't get overwhelmed. And because I'll do this myself. I'll wake up, I'm like, oh, I got this and that, and this and that. And like, and Maria's like, you're lumping. I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. Sorry.
Yeah.
And so, and when you stop that, you go, okay, yeah, I got this one, and I'll just spend some time. I can prioritize. This problem is not fixed. Well, I'm going to put that in the closet. This one I can do something about today. This one's going to take a week. Now I can start fashioning what I'm going to do and how I'm going to attack the problem. And being overwhelmed now gets taken out of the equation. And now I can use all that energy I was wasting on being anxious and overwhelmed to fixing the problems that I got in front of me. And when you go, all I got to do is fix one of them and I'll be back in. Okay. Yeah. Good.
I love that. I actually do that with my to-do lists. When I start to feel overwhelmed, it's like a mind map. I draw quadrants on a piece of paper and then I categorize them, and then I list all the little things that need to get done. And it seems way more manageable rather than this big heap of everything. Oh, my whole life needs organizing today. No,
I like that. Wait, so tell me how do you organize it?
I just make like on my paper, like I'll draw quadrants. So I'll make like, depending how many things I got in the go, often it's 4. There'll be like business, work, family, home. Sometimes I will also add in me. So
yeah, that's nice. Very nice of yourself.
Some fresh air. I need some water. I need some trees. Like, so that'll be in there too sometimes. And then under each category, because I think about, oh, for work I got to do this, and for business I got to do that, and for podcasting this, and then so my book is now in a 4 square. And everything is in its little piles. So it makes
then you can prioritize and go, I need to do this today, and I can wait till tomorrow, right? Yeah, awesome.
Yes, and delegate, which often I'm sometimes not great at. So I can also be like, hey, can you help
delegation is hard.
It is hard, yeah. Yes. Yes. Thank you so much. Where can people find your book and find you, Dr. Sprouse?
So the book is on Amazon and it's on Barnes & Noble. I just recorded the audio version, and so I'm hoping that should come out soon. I just finished filming. Actually, I filmed a couple months ago an online course, so people can go on my website. It's called The Less Stress Doc, And on the website, it's not there yet, but it'll be coming this month. The website's there, but the online course you'll be able to get there. And I'm getting ready to do a seminar in June 15th. It's a 1-day seminar. So in my house, I have the luxury of living on the water. So we're on this like creek that's really nice, right? And so we're gonna have like 15 or 16 people come, and we'll have a 1-day spa. We're gonna do a Reiki sound bath. Have you ever done one of those?
Yes, yes, that's
They're nice,
beautiful.
aren't they? Ooh, yeah. And
Yes.
I met a lady at another conference who's going to do a half an hour on mindfulness, and she does all this great interactive stuff. And then I have another friend of mine who read the book, and she called me back and said, "You know what? I read your book, and I decided, you know what? You're right. I got to take control of my life." So she sold her big house and used the money and paid cash for a bungalow that was like a half mile from the beach. And now she goes down to the beach like 4 out of 5, 4 days out of the week. And she goes, I let go of some stuff. She goes, I feel so much better. And I'm like, and she's telling me about how like she had to decide she wasn't Velcro, that everything didn't stick to her, and that less is more. And I'm like, you know what? Everybody in that seminar needs to hear that story. And she's like, so I convinced her to come up, and so she's going to give her testimonial. And I'm like, yeah, so it's going to be freaking awesome. So here's what we called it. We called it a day spa for your mind.
I love that. I
Is
love
that
that. I saw
nice?
some of the pictures online. It's beautiful. Your
Yeah.
dock with the beautiful chairs and
Yeah.
gorgeous. It's
So
like a
then we're
spa.
like, so I came up with this thought. I was like, I've been going to the dentist over the last year because I had some stuff that I had to get taken care of. And it's cost a lot of money, right? And I came up with this thought, like, wait, if you have an achy tooth, you're gonna spend a lot of money to get rid of the achy tooth. And insurances are pretty crappy when it comes to dental stuff, right?
They are terrible.
But what happens when you have an achy mind? Like, how much are you willing to spend to fix your achy mind? Like your tooth, it's like it's one little piece of your body, and it's like, yeah, and it'll go away. Like your mind, it hangs with you all the time. How much would it be worth you to get rid of that problem, right? Yeah, how nice would that be? So we'll
Yeah.
see.
Your mind
Yeah.
is what powers this whole operation.
Yes.
So it
Yep. So
should be
I'm
the
looking forward to
priority.
giving
Yeah.
the seminar. I think it's going to be awesome. So
Yes. I wish I lived closer because
yeah. Well, so somewhere along the line, and I learned this from Tony Robbins, right? So he always wanted to do his things in person. And when the
yes.
pandemic hit, he tells this whole story of how, like, I'm going to do this in person. I don't care. And I'm going to go to Vegas and I'm going to do this and I'm going to go to my home. And all those things didn't work out. So he had to do something online. And then he realized, wow, how powerful is online. You can get some of the same benefits and reach people who would never be able to come to you. So
Yes.
somewhere along the line, there'll be a hybrid version of this, but not yet. Today, this one is more as much for me as it is for people
Yes.
coming, because it's like it helps me hone my message to make sure, like, I know my message pretty well, but it
Mhm.
doesn't do me any good if you don't get the message. And so part of my learning curve is to get my message into you so that you can use it, because you're the person that's the important part, right?
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for your time, Gary. It has been lovely speaking with you. And I'll get our audience to check out the show notes that they can reach out to learn more about your retreats, your offerings, your online course, and of course to pick up your very special, amazing book.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show. Have me back on sometime. We'll talk some
I
more.
will. You can come back anytime. You have
All
an
right.
open invitation.